The calm waters of Enkamiri Kingdom turned crimson with blood as Queen Ifema's army descended upon it, their mission merciless and precise. The serene ocean floor, once alive with the bustling life of the Enkamiri merfolk, became a battleground of screams and bloodshed. Kill the young mermen, those no older than 6 months. Queen Ifema's voice rang out with authority, her emerald green tail flicking powerfully as she floated above the chaos. Her scepter glowed ominously in her hand, casting an eerie green light across the battlefield. Spare the rest only if they surrender, but take the older males. We will turn them into slaves for our armies. By her side her husband, King Ikane, nodded in agreement, his golden crown gleaming. This is necessary, Omii, he said calmly, his gaze cold and resolute. Eliminate all the newborns below 6 months. With their men enslaved and their heirs dead, they will be ours forever. Below them, the army of Oduamiri moved with deadly precision, carrying out their gruesome orders. The cries of mothers echoed as they clutched their infant sons, trying desperately to shield them from the advancing warriors. One mother, Amarachi, held her 6-month-old son, Somto, close to her chest. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered prayers under her breath, her tail trembling with fear. She had hidden behind a large coral formation, hoping to go unnoticed. But Udoka, the queen's trusted general, had a nose for fear. He caught sight of Amarachi's shimmering bronze tail as she shifted nervously. There's someone here, he growled, signaling his men. They surrounded the coral and yanked her out of hiding. Please, Amarachi cried, clutching Somto tightly. He's just a baby. Spare him, I beg you. Udoka sneered, his spear glinting in the dim light. The queen's orders were clear. No male child under 6 months survives. Amarachi's desperation turned to rage. She screamed, baring her teeth like a wild beast, and lunged at Udoka with her free hand, claws outstretched. You will not take my son, she roared. Udoka, unfazed, swatted her aside with a brutal blow from his tail, sending her crashing into a rock. Somto let out a wail, his tiny voice cutting through the chaos. Amarachi, bloodied but determined, pushed herself up and charged again, this time sinking her claws into Udoka's arm. You'll die before I let you touch him, she screamed. But Udoka's cruelty knew no bounds. With a swift motion, he drove his spear through her chest, her cries silenced in an instant. As her lifeless body sank to the seabed, her son's cries grew louder. Enough, Udoka muttered darkly. He raised his spear and plunged it into the infant without hesitation. The water around them darkened with blood as the wailing stopped. Above the massacre, Queen Ifema and King Ikane observed the scene with satisfaction. The mothers will fight like wild animals to protect their sons, Ifem remarked, her tone detached. But it makes no difference. We will root out every last one of them. And the older males? Penny inquired, watching as several of the stronger teenage mermen were dragged away in chains. They will serve us, Sayuma replied coolly. The strongest will become soldiers in our army, trained to fight for the kingdom they once called their enemy. Among the enslaved was a merman named Chijoku, a young but fiercely defiant warrior. As the chains tightened around his wrists, he glared up at Udoka and snarled, "This isn't over. One day, I'll make you regret this." Udoka laughed cruelly. "You'll learn your place soon enough, boy. Or you'll die trying." The massacre continued until the once thriving Enkumiri kingdom was reduced to ruins. The waters were silent now, save for the faint sobs of the survivors, women and girls who had lost everything. Far away, in the shadows of the coral forests, a lone boy escaped through a hidden passage. Chikwudi, the youngest son of King Olachukwa's advisor, swam as fast as his small tail could carry him, the sound of his mother's last scream ringing in his ears. Above the ruins, Fema raised her scepter high. "Enkumiri is no more," she declared. "The reign of Oduamiri continues." The king and queen of Enkumiri had no choice to bow to her in submission. And beside her, King Ikone smiled. "Long live the queen." Chukwudi's body felt like dead weight as he swam through the murky waters. His once strong strokes now sluggish. For days, he had fought against the overwhelming exhaustion, propelled only by the images of the slaughter and the fear that still gripped his heart. The deep sea around him seemed endless, a dark abyss threatening to consume him. As he sank, unable to keep himself afloat any longer, a pair of strong hands seized him, pulling him upward. He didn't have the strength to resist. The last thing he saw before blacking out was the rough, weathered faces of two mermen, their dark eyes filled with both curiosity and concern. When Chukwuda finally regained consciousness, he found himself lying on a soft bed of seaweed, the faint light of bioluminescent plants casting eerie shadows over the small hut where he lay. He tried to sit up, but dizziness overwhelmed him and he slumped back. "Take it easy, stranger," a voice said, gentle but firm. Looking up, Chukwuda saw one of the mermen who had rescued him, now standing over him with a bowl of food in hand. His features were sharp and hardened, a reminder of the hard life of the sea, yet his eyes were filled with compassion. "Where am I?" Chukwuda rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're in the kingdom of Omii," the merman replied. "We found you drifting in the currents, nearly lifeless. You're safe now." Chukwuda blinked, his mind reeling. A distant kingdom known for its peace and isolation. He had never expected to end up here, but in that moment, it felt like the only chance for survival. The merman led him to a grand hall, where a figure sat upon a throne carved from coral and adorned with seaweed. The king was old, his scales glistening with the wisdom of years lived beneath the waves. His eyes were narrow, calculating as Chukwudi approached. He knelt, feeling the weight of the king's gaze upon him. "You have traveled far," the king said, his voice low and steady. "What brings you to our kingdom?" Chukwud swallowed hard, his heart racing as the memory of the horrors surged back. "Queen Ifema. She has slaughtered our children, all the mermen under 6 months old. Anyone who opposed her she killed. She has taken those she spared as slaves, forced to fight in her armies." The room fell silent. The king's brow furrowed, his lips tight. A murmur spread through the merman council, seated along the edges of the hall. The atmosphere turned tense, and Chukwudi could feel the unease settling over the group. One elderly merman, his scales faded with age, spoke up. "We have kept peace with Queen Ifema for years. We have paid our homage, kept our distance. She has never shown aggression toward us. Perhaps, if we continue to do so, we may avoid her wrath." Chukwudi's eyes widened with disbelief. "You would stand by while she kills innocent children, while she enslaves your kind?" The king held up a hand, silencing the room. "We are not warriors," he said, his tone calm but firm. "We survive by living in harmony with the sea, not by confrontation. If we show weakness, if we show any threat to her, we will be next." Chukwuda's heart sank, his frustration boiling over. "So you would do nothing? You would let her destroy everything?" "We will feed you and shelter you," the king said softly. "But this is not our fight. Not yet." Elsewhere, word of the massacre reached the ears of Iziwa and his family. The news was like a storm, crashing through their peaceful existence. "We have no choice but to hide now because we are not strong enough. We need to build more forces and allies with the other kingdoms for us to be able to face Ifema," Omii said, his voice heavy with grief as he looked at Adeobi, who held their son tightly in her arms. The news of Ifema's bloodshed, of the innocent lives lost, had shaken him to the core. He could hardly believe it. Adeobi's eyes were red from crying. "What kind of monster kills innocent children?" she whispered, her voice cracking with sorrow. "How could she?" Dua clenched his fists, his face hardening. "Ifema is consumed by her fear. She will stop at nothing to secure her throne. She's lost all sense of reason." Say, ever the voice of practicality turned toward them. "We can't stay here forever. But for now, it's the only place safe enough for NMD," she said, her eyes scanning the horizon. "We need to keep moving, find a place where she can't reach us." Omii nodded, placing a reassuring hand on Asa's shoulder. "We will find a way to end this. I promise you." Together, they swam into the darkness of a hidden cave, the walls of which glowed faintly from the bioluminescent algae that clung to the rocks. The faint, ghostly light illuminated their path, casting long shadows around them. As they entered the cave, a sense of foreboding filled the air, as though the very ocean itself was holding its breath. "Is this it?" Omii asked, her voice trembling as she looked around. "Is this our new home?" "For now, yes," Omii answered softly. "But it won't be forever. We can't hide forever. We need to strike back." Asa nodded. "We'll be ready when the time comes." Omii looked at his family, his heart heavy with the burden of the promise he had made. He would not let Enslavema's reign of terror continue. Not for his son, not for his people, not for any of them. The cave was silent, save for the sound of their breathing. Outside, the world was dark and uncertain, but in that moment they were safe. Now, the waters stirred with despair as Queen Enslavema's forces returned triumphantly to Omii, dragging behind them scores of captives from conquered underwater kingdoms. The enslaved mermen, bound and broken, were her spoils of war. They were herded into the city like cattle, their faces etched with fear and hopelessness. The captives were thrown into dark dungeons beneath the city, their chains rattling ominously as they were forced to rebuild the kingdom they had been torn from. Day and night, they toiled relentlessly, their labor fueling Enslavema's ambition to transform Omii into an empire of unmatched power. In the throne room of Omii, Enslavema's anger boiled over. She sat on a throne of coral and gold, her serpent seer coiled lazily at her feet, its scales glinting ominously in the dim light. "Are you sure they exist, serpent?" Enslavema's voice was sharp, each word cutting through the silence. "We've scoured every underwater kingdom. No one has seen them, no one speaks of them. Is your prophecy false?" The serpent's glowing yellow eyes fixed on hers. "The child destined to overthrow you still lives, my queen," it hissed. Enslavema stood abruptly, her scepter clutched tightly in her hand. "Then find him," she bellowed. "I will not rest until he is dead and my throne secure." Udoka, her loyal but visibly weary general, knelt before her. "My queen, we've sent warriors to the farthest reaches of the waters. We've interrogated prisoners, searched villages, and seized newborns. But the child is nowhere to be found." Enslavema's voice was icy. "Then search harder, Udoka. Bring me the boy's head, or you will lose your own." Years later, Omii was no longer just a kingdom. It was an empire. Queen Enslavema had waged war on 34 underwater territories, conquering them all. The city stood tall and menacing, rebuilt by the hands of slaves who worked tirelessly, their faces etched with despair. Among the slaves, one stood out: Chidoku, now a hardened warrior. Though once a boy torn from his home, he had proven his strength and loyalty, rising to become the personal guard of Prince Imika's only son. Yet in his heart, he still bore a simmering hatred for Udoka, the man who had captured him years ago. Prince Imika, now a fierce teenager, mirrored his mother's ruthlessness. His training in the warrior ranks had honed him into a brutal enforcer. As he strode through the slave camps, his presence alone sent shivers down spines. He spared no one his wrath, enforcing his mother's will without mercy. "Faster, you scum!" Imika barked at the slaves hauling massive stones for the city's expansion. "If you collapse, you die where you fall." Joe stood at his side, his expression unreadable. He watched the prince lash a frail worker with a whip, his mind drifting to his own days of suffering. He clenched his fists but said nothing, his loyalty bound by chains of survival. In the royal chambers, the serpent seer slithered onto Queen Enslavema's lap, its forked tongue flicking in and out. "The prophecy remains unfulfilled, my queen," it whispered. "But there is a way to hasten the child's discovery." "What way?" Enslavema asked, narrowing her eyes. "Place a bounty," the serpent suggested. "Offer freedom and power to anyone who brings you the child. A kingdom to rule, with reduced tribute to Omii. It will tempt even the most loyal subjects of your enemies. Feng smiled coldly. An enticing idea. She called out to Udoka. Moments later, Udoka entered the room, bowing deeply. Yes, my queen. Send word to every kingdom under my rule. Ifeoma commanded. A bounty is now on the child's head. Freedom and a kingdom to rule await the one who finds him. Udoka hesitated. Your Majesty, such an offer may inspire rebellion among our own ranks. Feng's voice turned venomous. Are you questioning me, Udoka? Udoka dropped to his knees. Never, my queen. I will see it done. Meanwhile, deep within the shadows of the Omii dungeon, whispers spread among the enslaved mermen. Zhou listened intently as the older slaves murmured about the prophecy. They say the boy will rise to overthrow the queen, one muttered. Do you believe it? He asked, his voice low. I believe in hope, the elder replied. And I believe Ifeoma's reign of terror cannot last forever. Zhou's jaw tightened. Could he, a man shaped by pain and survival, be a part of that hope? He glanced toward the prince, who stood above them like a storm waiting to unleash its fury. The wheels of fate were turning, and Chijoku would soon have to choose where his loyalty truly lay. The secret alliances Enamir and his brother Izuwa had painstakingly built with the northern water kingdoms over the years were their only hope of survival. The Northern Alliance, comprising 20 kingdoms, had trained tirelessly, awaiting the inevitable clash with Queen Ifeoma. Yet, the threat that loomed over them would come from an unexpected betrayal. Omii's young and adventurous son often disobeyed his parents' warnings to avoid the coastal waters. He found solace and excitement there, especially during his secret meetings with his new friend Chui, a boy from the kingdom of Omii. On this particular day, they met at their usual spot near a hidden reef. Enamir Chui asked curiously, why do you always keep things about yourself secret? I've noticed you're different. You have powers. Undis smiled cautiously. I just like my privacy, Chui. It's safer that way. Chui frowned. But why? I thought we were friends. We are, Enamir replied, his tone firm. But there are things I can't tell anyone, even you. Chui let it go but couldn't shake his suspicions. Enam's strength, speed, and command over water were not ordinary. Days later, a rumor swept through Omii about a boy Queen Ifeoma was searching for. A boy with extraordinary powers, destined to overthrow her. A massive bounty had been placed on his head, along with the promise of freedom for anyone who turned him in. Chukwudi's heart raced as he pieced it together. Could it be Enamir? He muttered to himself. The thought of freedom from Omii and the chance to return to his lost home clouded his judgment. Without hesitation, Chukwudi went to the king of Omii. My king, he began nervously. I believe I know the boy Queen Ifeoma seeks. His name is Enamir, and he has powers unlike anything I've seen. The king's eyes widened. Are you certain of this? Yes, my king. I can help you confirm it, Chukwudi replied eagerly. With Chukwudi's help, the king sent spies to follow Enamir. It didn't take long for them to uncover the truth. Enamir was indeed the son of Enamir, the fugitive prince. The king was overjoyed. Send word to Queen Ifeoma at once, the king declared. But Chukwudi stepped forward. Your Majesty, I discovered him. I should be the one to inform the queen and claim the bounty. The king's face darkened. He saw Chukwudi's ambition as a threat to his authority. You've grown bold, boy, the king snarled. Guards, take him. The guards struck Chukwudi with a rod, and his limp body was cast into the dark waters. Certain he was dead, the king turned his focus to alerting Queen Ifeoma. But Chukwudi survived. Barely able to swim, he dragged himself to the reef where he and Enamir always met. When Enamir arrived, Chukwudi was slumped against a rock, blood seeping from a wound on his side. Chukwudi! Enamir exclaimed, rushing to his side. Chukwudi looked up with tear-filled eyes. I betrayed you, enemy. I told the king about you. I wanted the bounty. I wanted my freedom. But they tried to kill me instead. Enemda's jaw tightened, but he crouched beside his friend. Why are you telling me this now? Because you need to know. Chukwudi cried. The king is sending word to Queen Ifem. You and your family are in danger. I'm so sorry, enemy. I only wanted to go back home. Enemda's anger softened as he saw the sincerity in Chukwudi's eyes. He nodded. I forgive you. But we need to warn my father immediately. NMD and Chukwudi swam as fast as they could to the northern kingdoms, where Izemiri and his family had been in hiding. Upon arrival, Chukwudi was stunned to see the hidden kingdom bustling with warriors, mermen and mermaids wielding spears and shields, their bodies conditioned for battle. Even NMD, young as he was, had been trained to fight. NMD rushed to his father. Father, we have a problem. Chukwudi told the king of Omii about us. And now he's sending word to Queen Ifem. Imri's face hardened. He turned to his brother Uwa, who stood nearby. It's time. Imri summoned Nwajidai, the wise old turtle who had been in hiding for years. The aged creature swam forward slowly, his deep voice resonating. The time has come, hasn't it, Imri? Yes, Imri said. Uma's forces will soon march on the northern kingdoms. We have 3 weeks to prepare. We need to use every moment wisely. Nwajidai nodded. I will guide you as I always have. But remember, the battle ahead will test not just your strength but your hearts as well. The northern kingdoms rallied together under Emiri's leadership. Warriors trained day and night, sharpening their skills and preparing their weapons. Strategies were drawn up, and scouts were sent to monitor any movements from Omii and Oduemiri. As the days passed, NMD grew more determined. He trained alongside the other warriors, earning their respect with his courage and skill. Chukwudi, though still recovering, stayed close to NMD. I'll fight with you, he said. It's the least I can do after what I've done. NMD placed a hand on his shoulder. We'll fight together, Chukwudi. But this time it's not just for survival. It's for freedom. The northern kingdom stood ready, their warriors united and their spirits high. The calm before the storm was heavy with tension, but one thing was clear. This battle would decide the fate of the underwater realms. Far away in Omii, Queen Uma's palace gleamed under the soft glow of the moon. Inside, the atmosphere was tense yet charged with a sense of victory. The messenger from Omii stood before Queen Ifema, flanked by her guards, who eyed him suspiciously as he spoke. Long live my queen, the messenger said, bowing deeply. His voice echoed through the grand hall. I bring urgent news from the king of Omii. The boy you have searched for all these years has been found. Queen Uma's eyes lit up, her sharp gaze piercing through the man. She leaned forward, her fingers drumming on the armrest of her golden throne. Go on, she commanded, her voice cold and impatient. The boy is Prince Izemiri's son, the messenger continued. Not only is the boy alive, but Izemiri has formed an alliance with the northern kingdom. Gasps rippled through the room. A sinister smile crept across Queen Ifema's face as her serpent seer slithered into the hall, its scales gleaming under the torchlight. The creature's deep, raspy voice filled the silence. Finally, my queen, the serpent seer hissed, coiling itself beside her. My prophecy has come true. The boy lives, and your enemies gather strength. But now is the time to strike. Queen Ifema rose from her throne, her laughter echoing like thunder in the hall. Ha ha ha, they thought they could hide from me forever. Fools, Omii dares to defy me, even after all I've done to destroy him. Her husband, King Ikan, leaned back in his chair, a sly grin playing on his lips. It seems the northern kingdom is too blind to see the trap they've invited into their midst. We must not waste this opportunity, my queen. Queen Uma's voice rang out sharply. Udoka, a tall, muscular warrior, stepped forward, bowing low. My queen, it will take us 3 weeks to reach the northern kingdom, she said. Prepare the warriors and ready the warships. We march for battle at dawn. Yes, my queen, Udoka replied, his tone steady and resolute. As Udoka left to carry out the queen's orders, Prince Emika, her son, stepped forward. His youthful face was calm, but his eyes burned with ambition. Mother, let me lead the charge, he said. This boy, this son of Enamir, has no claim to anything. Allow me to end him and bring you his head as a trophy. Queen Ifem placed a hand on her son's shoulder, her smile full of pride. Patience, Emika, your time will come. For now, watch and learn. The serpent seer interjected, its forked tongue flickering. Beware, my queen. The northern kingdom is not without its secrets. The boy is the key to a power greater than any of us can imagine. Do not underestimate him or his father. Queen Ifem's eyes narrowed. I fear nothing. Not the boy, not Enamir, and certainly not the northern kingdom. By the time I'm done, their alliances will crumble, and their kingdom will burn. Queen Ifema stood up. Her serpent seer whispered in her ear, its words chilling and cryptic. The boy's destiny is tied to the sea and the stars. If you fail to take him, his power will rise, and he will be your undoing. Queen Ifema smiled darkly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Then I will not fail. The northern kingdom will fall, and Enamir will beg for mercy before I crush him and his son. The hall fell silent as her words hung in the air, heavy with malice and intent.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to stay connected by leaving your thoughts in the comments, giving the video a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you're the first to know when a new content drops. We appreciate your support and look forward to seeing you in the next video.